Canada breaking away from the US, Europe becoming the new partner? In 2025, trade between Canada and the EU has surged by over 50% in just 6 years, while trade relations with the US have hit rock bottom for the first time in decades. Canada's Prime Minister has not chosen Washington as his first official visit. Instead, he went straight to Europe. Is this the moment Canada finally steps away from America's influence? Trade war. The US slaps Canada with tariffs. Once one of the strongest trade relationships in the world, Canada and the US are now locked in a trade war, and it all started with Washington's aggressive tariff policies in 2025. February 1st, 2025. The US imposed a 25% tariff on most Canadian imports. March 11th, 2025. The US doubled tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to a staggering 50%, sending shockwaves through global metal markets. For Canada, it was an economic nightmare. But Ottawa wasn't about to sit idly by. March 12th, 2025, Canada strikes back, announcing a 25% retaliatory tariff on $21 billion worth of American goods. And this time, it wasn't just symbolic. Canada hit back where it hurts, targeting steel and aluminum, crippling U.S. exports, consumer goods, from processed foods to household items. High-tech products, a massive industry between the two nations. For the first time in modern history, Canada is showing that it no longer relies on the U.S. for economic survival. And this is where things get even more interesting. Europe, Canada's new strategic partner. In a shocking move, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney skipped Washington altogether in his first official trip and went straight to France and the UK. Why? The CETA trade deal, Canada-EU trade agreement, has boosted Canada-EU trade by over 50% since 2017. The EU is now Canada's third largest trade partner, only behind the US and China. Canadian exports to the EU have soared 46.4% since 2016, giving Canada more options than ever before. Mark Carney himself made it crystal clear. Canada is the most European nation outside of Europe, and it's not just about trade. Canada's pivot to Europe is also about military power. Canada joins Europe's military alliance. A shift in global power? Canada isn't just looking to Europe for economic strength. It's also making big moves in the military sphere. Some major developments. Canada joins the EU's PESCO military project, allowing faster troop movements across Europe. Canada leads NATO forces in Latvia, solidifying its role in defending Europe from external threats. Canada expands intelligence sharing with the UK, boosting cybersecurity and economic warfare defenses. For the first time ever, a non-EU nation is participating in PESCO, proving that Canada is now an essential player in European security. The message is clear. Canada is no longer looking only to the US for global leadership. The US reacts, but is it losing control? The White House is not happy, and Washington is pulling every trick in the book to pull Canada back. The US has threatened higher auto tariffs, targeting one of Canada's biggest exports. Major US corporations have been pressured to reduce business with Canada in a move to apply economic leverage. But here's the problem for Washington. Canadians are done with America's tactics. A February 2025 Abacus data poll reveals 68% of Canadians view the EU more favorably than the US. 44% believe Canada should even consider joining the EU, something unthinkable a decade ago. For decades, Canada was America's closest ally. But now, the numbers don't lie. Canadians are looking for a new future. Final question: will America keep Canada or lose it forever? Canada's shift toward Europe is not just about economics, it's a geopolitical earthquake. The US is rapidly losing its grip over a nation it once considered an unshakable ally. So the real question is, can Washington turn the tide? Or is Canada already gone? The next moves from Washington and Ottawa will determine the future of North America. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.
Breaking overnight, President Trump enacting sweeping new tariffs on steel and aluminum, 25%. Europeans are retaliating in a major way.
Will the trade relationship between the US, EU, and Canada collapse? Trump's re-imposition of tariffs has prompted the EU and Canada to decide on a strong response. Where will this tension lead? President Donald Trump, famous for his protectionist policies, has once again criticized the European Union. Why? According to him, the EU's unfair trade practices and the global overcapacity in production have harmed domestic industries. As a result, Trump has decided to reimpose a 25% tariff on steel and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports from the EU. This decision aims to protect America's strategic industries, but it also comes as a shock to EU countries, especially when the EU has always seen this as a move to protect US national security.
It'll be 25%. Generally speaking, and that'll be on cars and all other things. And European Union is a different case than Canada.
Additionally, Trump continues to criticize the EU for its digital services tax measures, particularly adjustments targeting major US tech companies like Apple and Meta. This adds another blow to the already complicated relationship between these trading partners. Faced with Trump's tariff policies, the EU is not sitting idly by. The European Union has decided to impose retaliatory measures, with tariffs amounting to up to $28 billion on US goods. However, the EU's goal is not just to respond, but also to hit products from key states controlled by the Republican Party. The main items affected include agricultural products, such as soybeans from Louisiana, beef and poultry from Nebraska and Kansas. Consumer goods, cars, and luxury items are also on the target list. Clearly, the EU is choosing to apply pressure on America's politically sensitive areas to force the Trump administration to reconsider its tariff policies.
Die Zollbeschlüsse der USA für falsch. Und wir werden darauf angemessen und schnell reagieren. Die Vorschläge der Kommission werden wir jetzt prüfen. Dazu stehen wir in engem Kontakt mit der Kommission und den anderen Mitgliedstaaten.
It's not just the EU. Canada is also in the mix. With retaliatory tariffs amounting to $29.8 billion Canadian dollars, around $20.7 billion US dollars, Canada is primarily targeting steel and aluminum, the products it exports the most to the US. This will seriously impact the steel, aluminum, and automobile industries in the US, industries that rely heavily on supply from Canada. In addition, these measures will affect consumer goods and automobile manufacturing industries in the US, which are already struggling to compete with foreign producers. How will the US administration respond when its traditional partners, like Canada, ramp up retaliatory actions like this? Despite the serious trade tensions, the EU and Canada continue to maintain their long-standing strategic relationships. Especially in the context of reducing reliance on energy from Russia, the EU has sought opportunities to collaborate with Canada to export energy to the European market. This is not only an opportunity for Canada, but also a long-term strategy for the EU to ensure stability in energy supply. Canada, a country rich in mineral resources, is working together with the EU in this field, which not only helps Canada boost exports, but also helps the EU reduce reliance on suppliers from unstable countries. Undoubtedly, the tensions between the US, EU, and Canada are a crucial factor shaping the global economic order in the coming years. If the transatlantic relationship continues to escalate, it could change not just the US economy, but also the distribution of global influence. Stay tuned for the next updates in the video, as we will dive deeper into these impacts and explore what may happen in the future. Canada has just cancelled the F-35 deal. Portugal has also withdrawn, and now a move that could change the North American defense landscape.
Comes just 2 days after a similar decision by Portugal. In January 2023, the Trudeau administration had signed a contract with Lockheed Martin to purchase 88 F-35 fighter jets.
Canada has just grabbed the world's attention by deciding to cancel the $19 billion USD deal to purchase 88 F-35s from Lockheed Martin, a deal they signed in 2023. And it's not just Canada. Portugal has also announced its withdrawal from the F-35 program. These two countries are now seeking alternative defense solutions, no longer depending on the US, and aiming for independence in protecting national security. The reason for canceling this deal is directly tied to the trade and political tensions between Canada and the US, especially under the leadership of Donald Trump. With protectionist policies and severe tariffs, reliance on the US for defense is no longer a safe option for Canada. For Portugal, the decision to withdraw from the F-35 program is equally significant. Portugal's defense minister, Nuno Melo, pointed out that the instability in U.S. foreign policy under Donald Trump has made it impossible for them to continue pursuing the plan to acquire these fighter jets. The country is now seeking replacement fighter jets while building a more flexible and independent defense force, reducing dependence on traditional partners. So, if it's not the F-35, then which fighter jets will replace them in Canada's defense strategy? One of the most promising options right now is the Saab J39 Gripen, a product from Sweden. Saab has proposed building the Gripen in Canada.
There's a legal commitment to buy those. But another jet is being talked about a lot, which is the Saab Gripen. That was the runner-up in the long procurement process to get these F-35s lined up. And they'd committed to make more.
Which would help transfer technology and develop the domestic defense industry of the country. This is a great opportunity for Canada to gain more autonomy in equipping its military and defense systems, while maintaining strong cooperation with NATO countries. While Canada is looking for these alternative solutions, the country's defense industry is also growing strongly. Canada has a defense industry that contributes about 10 billion Canadian dollars annually to the economy and creates more than 64,000 jobs. Companies like General Dynamics Land Systems in Ontario and CAE Inc. in Montreal are supplying essential military products for Canada's armed forces and government agencies. The Canadian government is also accelerating domestic defense technology development programs, aiming to reduce dependence on international partners. On the other hand, the shift in Canada's defense strategy is not just an internal shift, but also reflects a broader trend in global military relations. The European Union, EU, with countries like Germany, France, and Italy, has increased defense spending by more than 30% from 2021 to 2024, reaching approximately 326 billion euros by 2024. Europe is now looking to reduce reliance on U.S. military systems, while promoting autonomy and developing advanced defense technologies. The EU's Rear Europe Initiative, which is expected to raise up to 800 billion euros to invest in defense, shows Europe's determination to achieve strategic autonomy in military systems. Canada is also working strongly with European countries in developing alternative defense solutions and sharing technology. The military cooperation between Canada and European countries is becoming an important part of Canada's defense strategy, helping create a more independent and flexible defense force. Along with this, European countries are also intensifying initiatives to ensure defense autonomy, reducing reliance on external partners outside the region. Stay tuned for more exciting developments to come. Mexico chooses silence, while Canada responds forcefully. Which strategy is the key to success when confronting Trump in this trade war? Canada, under the leadership of the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, has officially taken a hardline stance against U.S. tariffs after Trump imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from Canada. Ontario immediately retaliated by raising tariffs on electricity exports to the U.S.
President Trump's trade war is heating up. The Canadian province of Ontario says it will slap a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S. Let's go to CBS News correspondent Chanel Call. Chanel, great to see you.
This put pressure on important states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, forcing Trump to respond. Mark Carney, who is expected to bring a new wave for Canada, declared that the country could no longer trust the U.S. and must protect itself.
We will never, ever bow down to a bully. Canadians will always stick together. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families.
And it's not just Carney. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is also unafraid to confront Trump. This situation shows a shift in Canada's approach. They are no longer a silent ally, but a powerful partner capable of ramping up retaliation strategies when necessary. The 25% tariff that Ontario imposed on electricity exports to the U.S. could cost the U.S. economy billions of dollars. Specifically, New York State relies heavily on electricity from Canada, according to data from the U.S. Department of Commerce. The steel and aluminum tariffs reduced Canada's exports to the U.S. by $4.6 billion in 2018. Canada and Mexico are showing two very different strategies in response. Mexico, under the leadership of President López Obrador, maintains a discreet diplomatic strategy. Instead of confronting directly, Mexico has chosen to negotiate, yield, and remain silent to minimize conflict. Specifically, Mexico does not react as strongly as Canada, but instead opts for secret negotiations and one-on-one agreements with the U.S. In contrast, Canada has decided not to remain silent and to take bold action from the start. Mark Carney believes that the silence strategy towards Trump is not the solution. His prominent statement resonated strongly in the international community. If we stay silent, Trump will continue to disrespect us. That's why Canada chose to confront publicly, retaliate, and demand respect from the U.S. Although Mexico maintained a silent approach, data from the World Trade Organization, WTO, shows that Mexico still maintained a stable trade relationship with the U.S. through discreet negotiations. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, played an extremely important role in dealing with the U.S. when Trump raised tariffs on steel and aluminum. Doug Ford didn't hesitate to increase electricity tariffs for U.S. states, particularly New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. This was a strategic move to make the U.S. reconsider its decision. Is that this move made Trump rethink. U.S. trade representatives had to meet with the Ontario government for negotiations. This was a clear shift in how Trump treated Canada compared to Mexico. This proves that Canada's tough strategy was not in vain. Canada, under the leadership of Mark Carney and Doug Ford, has sent a clear message. If you want to respect us, we will fight for that. This trade war will continue, but Canada and Mexico could gain the upper hand if they continue to apply smart and bold strategies. Trump will find it difficult to maintain his bullying strategy in a globalized world, where countries can come together to counter unfair policies. Stay tuned, because the upcoming developments will leave you shocked. 90% of Canadian tourists canceling U.S. trips. Travel is no longer just about vacation. It's now a political statement. Canadian tourists boycotting U.S. travel. Every year, millions of Canadian tourists cross the border into the U.S. from Florida to New York, spending billions of dollars on travel services. However, this year, things have changed dramatically. According to the Old Orchard Beach Tourism Council, Canada accounts for 40% of the tourists in the area, but this year, that number has sharply dropped. Hotel owners like Sterling Morrison, Maine, report that over 90% of their Canadian customers have canceled their trips, causing severe losses for local businesses. These numbers reflect a major disruption in the tourism industry, especially since Canadian tourists have been a stable source of income for many regions. This is not only impacting the economy, but also weakening the economic relationship between the two neighboring countries. So, why is this happening? Trade tensions and hostile rhetoric between politicians have led to this shift. This is not just about a tourism boycott, but a clear expression of national pride. For many Canadians, traveling to the U.S. is not just for fun. It's a recognition of a peaceful and respectful relationship. The tensions in international relations have eroded these values, leading to the decision not to travel to the U.S. as a way of protesting the administration's policies. This is also a signal that countries will no longer tolerate decisions that can harm mutual respect. Wide-ranging economic impact. According to the Maine Tourism Council report, Canadian tourists contribute about $1.2 billion annually to the local economy. Each Canadian tourist spends not only at resorts, but also in shops, restaurants, and attractions. This boycott could force many businesses to close or scale down operations during the tourist season. This issue isn't just affecting the tourism industry. Other industries like transportation, lodging services, and retail stores are also being hit hard. Businesses may need to find replacement customers or accept declining profits while costs remain unchanged. In the midst of a struggling economy, the absence of Canadian tourists not only reduces revenue, but also puts small businesses at risk of closure, deepening the economic crisis in the region. This isn't just tourism, it's a political statement. So, is tourism still just tourism? It's time we realize that tourism can now be a powerful tool for political statements. When people choose to boycott a country, not because they dislike the tourist attractions, but because of that country's policies and statements, it becomes a lesson in national pride. With 40% of the tourists at Old Orchard Beach being Canadian, this change could have far-reaching impacts. This isn't just a loss in revenue, but a message of dissatisfaction with the U.S. national policies. This tourism policy has now become a tool to express political views. It reflects not only the resistance from the Canadian people, but could spark similar movements from other countries, where tourism becomes a means to show discontent with U.S. international policies. This event is not only a blow to the U.S. economy, but also a lesson in respect within international relations. When a country decides to stop cooperating on tourism and consumption, it's not just about dissatisfaction, but a form of resistance to actions that could harm their values and sovereignty. It also shows that tourism isn't just about moving from one country to another, but now it's a part of soft power strategy. The Canadians are teaching the U.S. an important lesson in self-respect and respect. How will international relations change after this event? Will we see other countries adopt a similar strategy, using tourism as a tool to express dissatisfaction with the policies of other nations? To find out what happens next, stay with us and watch the rest of the video.